Thank you all for coming to our presentation. I know you all were very excited to hear about legalese and legal things. We were told, Kay's been giving this talk for quite a while. Forever. Since she actually, one of these slides, I don't know if you'll be able to figure out which one, was created by her in the womb.
It's true.
And it was kind of like a cave drawing on the inside of the uterus. And I saw a picture of it and I put it into PowerPoint. But last year, I don't like that. It made me nervous. So please don't have any expectations. You may learn something, you may not. It may be boring, it may be interesting, but either way, when you write the cards, write that we were awesome.
You torture people again next year.
Yes. This is us, or it's not really us, but it's a few things we do. As you can see, Kay is more important than I am. I don't really do anything that interesting, so you just read Kay's column. But yeah, no, you've all seen Kay. She's gave a presentation every hour for the last 2 days, and gave an amazing talk. When was it? I guess Friday morning?
Yesterday morning.
I'm losing track of the days already and what happened when. But you know, Burning board member, Meta Regional from Seattle. I'm from New York. I'm an attorney by trade, and I do things with Costume Cult and a small little art card called Toad, and I try, whenever possible, to help out with things like this and community-related things, especially if they have a legal affiliation. And anyone who can pronounce the name of my firm is welcome to free coffee when they serve it outside. No one's even going to try.
I can't do it.
And these are just some pictures of the things that we're involved in, because pictures make people happy. So we'd like to just go around the room briefly and get everyone's name, where they're from, and whether or not they're involved in a entity, and what stage is at. So, you know, David Katz, I'm from New York, Costume Cult, and we have a non-for-profit, which is filed with the state, but has not yet been filed with the IRS for 501c3 status. So just, you know, I've done nothing yet and I'm here, or I've been doing this for 40 years and I have 100 nonprofits that each bring in $1 million a year. Whatever's going on, we'd just like to know that. Yeah, you're probably in the room.
You should come to the one tomorrow.
But, yeah, that would be awesome.
I'm Mary Holt. I'm from Sacramento. I help form Sacramento Valley Spark. It's a nonprofit that's cleared through the state, and we're just about to clear it through the feds.
Nice. I go here.
I'm Yobi Bear with New Mexico. I'm on the New Mexico Regional Burner Council, as much as that is. My main push right now is on Regionauts. I created a website as a hub for regional burners to be able to use in a participatory fashion. We just started throwing events, and it became very clear to me I needed some kind of business entity before I get in trouble.
Yeah.
So your money is in a shoebox, basically, is where you're at.
It's in my pocket.
Okay, excellent.
Get him later.
Well, yeah.
I'm Brian Pridham from Santa Cruz, one of the organizers for our Santa Cruz regional decompression called Unscrews. We did it 3 years, and I'm currently about to become a co-regional, or apply for one anyway. And I think we are an LLC. It was in process. I don't know if it's completed.
Great.
Go over there.
Boxes, Boise, Idaho, part of the Boise Burners LLC. We're currently in the process of trying to become a 501c3. And you know, we got in the midst, hopefully here soon, we'll have our own regional. But this was our 14th decom.
Nice.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Warren Trezevant. I'm a board member of BRAF, and one of the things we do is grant money to artists who submit applications, and we try to put art into civic arenas, and there already is, and there's always, I need to learn more good business so I can better inform that.
Hi, I'm Mr. Wa. I'm an independent filmmaker documenting you guys' talk today for Media Mecca and the conference. I'm a Belgian expatriate, been living in the Bay Area for 12 years, following culture there and starting, you know, all kinds of cultural performance shows, and I guess I'm back to the fold today for you guys.
Awesome.
Who's over there? Loud if you can, the room is terrible acoustics.
My name is Dean Kochi. I work with Utopia down in San Diego, and we currently are transitioning from a for-profit to a nonprofit filed with the state, and working on our 1023 to get nonprofit 501c3 status federally. Personally, I am a financial planner who's new to the community and trying to help as many people as I can is my gift.
Awesome.
No one in the community makes money. It's all Bitcoin and gifting.
Hi, I'm Real Girl from the South Bay. I'm the single regional contact for the South Bay. Originally there were two, and then there was just me, and then I had two other co-regionals, and we founded an LLC, and then they both retired, so I'm basically a one-person LLC and have been for about 7 years. We have regional events. We'll have our 7th pre-compression this year. Usually we about break even or lose money. I haven't really been pushing for a not-for-profit just because I don't have a board. I don't have, a lot of other leaders who would want to be involved that way, but I still think for my own, benefit and also to set the foundation for growth in the community, it would be good to push towards a nonprofit.
One of the things that we will be talking about is, when you should and shouldn't go for a nonprofit and why. So it'll be interesting to hear what you think at the end.
Camera Girl, Technology Director for Burning Man. I was part of the conversation encouraging us to turn into a nonprofit, and now I spend a lot of time sitting on the fence between the two entities, trying to pave the road in front of the nonprofit, get the LLC technology to where it needs, and to keep an eye on all of you and try to figure out how we can pull it all together without it becoming an administrative and bureaucratic nightmare down the road for us all. I spend a lot of time thinking 3 to 5 years ahead and making Brooke worry and have to answer very complicated questions.
And I love you.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, I'm James. I live locally. In my day job, I work for a big strategy consulting firm, and I've got me and a couple of other burners from the strategy firm to help the board out thinking through these things. So we're basically drawing on anything we can from what's happened around the world with different projects, all of our databases, all of our experience with how to do this sort of stuff, and we're pulling it all in together.
It's becoming apparent to me that everyone in the room knows more than I do. If anyone wants to switch places, Brooke.
Right, just leave that one.
I'm Brooke Oliver. I'm an art and entertainment attorney with a focus on activist, world-changing organizations and how they should be structured for global revolution or something. So, and cake. I work with Burning Man. I'm working on the transition from an event production organization to the global Burning Man network and how we make that happen. So.
Jamie, Ottawa, we don't have an entity yet, and I'm sort of curious what you touched on in regards to that, because we've been doing our event for about 4 years, more as a for-profit local thing, and trying to see what's on the other side and stay ahead of some of the questions that might come up.
So there's one person who actually is here to take it.
Don't worry, I'm also here to take the class.
Okay.
My name's Ava. I'm from Austin. I've been pretty involved with Burning Flipside for some years, and I'm taking some time off from helping with Flipside to co-direct Austin's chapter of Burners Without Borders.
Yes.
Through that, we're super excited about some projects that I think that we're in the planning stages of wanting to form a 501c3. So I am here to take notes and kind of see if that's the right path for us and where we want to go from here.
Super.
Jungle Gym, I'm from Reno. We're an LLC, have been for a long time, trying to decide or just learn about whether or not it makes sense to change or at some point.
Jessie, Mama J. I am camp leader for More Carrots. We're a playa camp, and we're starting to own some property, and we're very, very focused on moving away from things that we have to rent and do every year and own more property and own more infrastructure. And so I'm very curious about the entities and what might be developed.
Where in the country are you?
Physically, I'm in DC, but our camp is international. A lot of strong Australian base, and also I have a vision of having a wholesome goodness village, and so I'm looking to build my skills with the theme camp to move up to village level and what might be necessary for that, and be able to support the camps in that.
Great.
I'm Mike Grove. I'm a regional contact for Vancouver, and we started a not-for-profit in 2008, and I was part of it for the first 3 terms, and now I'm kind of kicked back and watched what's happened. So yeah, I'm just been through this once about 5 years ago with you, and time to see it again, you know.
So you're wearing a orange shirt, which I really appreciate.
I'm Camber, the San Diego Collaborative Arts Project, and let's see, so I've been on the board member for the Sunburn San Diego, which was an LLC, which was horribly malformed and had a lot of mistakes that we're still trying to clean up a little bit. And I'm realizing through this process that there's a lot of this that should be plug and play, that shouldn't be anything you make decisions on. And if we made a plug and play kind of framework, then we could spend the energy on what is special about us, defining what we care about, what our passions are, and that's where we could spend all of our work instead of researching the same thing over and over again like every other regional has done.
Amen.
Knowledge sharing and skill sharing, on a bigger level, definitely.
Crucial.
I'm Hayu from Regional Contact from Chicago, and we have a not-for-profit called Burn.
Cool.
And I was going to say, I'll just say it now. I know that there are a bunch of people in here who have done this before, have a lot of experience. Please feel free to participate if you feel like you have something to say. I think this is a small enough group where you can absolutely use the experience of the people in the room as well.
Although I would strongly urge, if it's a question or if you feel that it was something very specific to you, to save it for the Q&A session at the end so we don't get kind of bogged down in a particular individual, whatever group aspect at any one point. But feel free to, correct us or just throw something at us and we'll get our attention if you want to, if it's something you really need to chime in with.
And we do have time at the end to answer, to talk about specific issues.
So one of the things that SC Chapter is particularly interested in is becoming a fiscal entity, so that smaller projects might come up.
We will talk about that.
Awesome.
That's why I say
We
make
have a
them
whole
wait a little bit. Okay. Ready?
Great. So why do you start an entity? I touched a bit on this the other day.
Sorry.
Innately, like when I did this course for the first time 6 years ago, almost everybody in the room had a shoebox full of money. It really was like literally a shoebox full of money. And the events were making money, this money was accumulating, there were questions about who got to control the money, where the money came from, how did the community know the money was working correctly. And so as a matter of necessity, people started starting organizations. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of different organizations that you can form. The basic sort of 2-second breakdown, a lot of people started out by forming a sole proprietorship, a single person. I am the sole proprietor of this business. It's easy, it's fairly easy, it's
Like
fairly
an
fast.
EBA?
What's that?
Like an EBA?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fairly easy, it's fairly fast, it's really not very effective for our community. I would not recommend starting a sole proprietorship for your community at all, so I'm not even going to talk about it really. Then there's LLC, and there are a bunch of you in the room here who have an LLC. An LLC stands for a limited liability corporation. It means that your liability as an owner of that business is limited. So if you have an LLC and someone gets very seriously hurt at your event and they sue, they can sue the company, not you personally. So it protects, a simple version of it, but it protects your liability. Those can be done with one person, those can be done with boards, those can be done with committees. It's still a fairly easy process. It starts getting expensive depending on what state you're in. Like, what do you say it is in New York?
New York, it's about $1,000. In New York City, it's about $1,000 to form an LLC because you have to publish, and if you have to publish, in the county, borough where you are located. So yeah, in New York, it could be $1,000 to form an LLC, not including paying someone to do it. If you have to pay someone to do it.
It's less in Washington State, but it's still.
But you have to file a yearly, which we don't in New York.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Anyway, And then you get to nonprofit. So there's some stuff in between. There's some cool new business structures in California that was being mentioned in the last talk we saw that sort of straddled this line between nonprofit and for-profit. It's really kind of cool. But I'll skip that one for the moment. A nonprofit is the thing that everybody seems really inclined to move towards. It seems to make the most sense. It is a public service. It is charity. Later, if you want to buy me whiskey, I'll tell you all about how I think art should not be in the nonprofit sector. So this is the one that makes most sense. It feels the best to us. It's culturally the best. It's owned by the community. Nonprofit organizations are responsible to their shareholders, just like any other corporation is. However, the shareholders in nonprofit corporations are the public, or the directly served community. And so you need to be responsible to your shareholders, because if they get pissed off, they're not going to donate money to you, they're not going to attend your events, they're not going to support your programs. And so it really needs, especially for our culture and especially emerging, really need to be in communication with your community about that not-for-profit. Nonprofit structures are not simple. They're not easy. They take a huge amount of time. You spend a gajillion hours working on a 1023 form, right? And you spin your wheels with some of the smartest people in your community trying to put together a bunch of legal forms to then create a really complicated business structure that you have to manage and do reports on and have your fiscal accounting for and file your taxes, and it is not an easy road. But it does allow you to take in tax-deductible donations. It does allow you to do things like a nonprofit prices on things. A lot of grants require that you be a nonprofit organization to be able to get them. So it certainly offers a lot of things that are appropriate to our community.
The basic overview of what we want to do today is talk about what you were saying is why would someone want to form an entity? What are the options that you have when you're looking to form an entity? And in particular with the non-for-profit, as Kay mentioned, you may be biting off more than you can chew, or maybe more than you want to chew. There's a lot of vegetarians in our community. I think there maybe should be a lot more for-profitarians when it comes to entity selection.
Yeah.
And we're going to touch a little bit briefly at the end, in particular with nonprofits, of how do you not end up in the papers, in jail, disgraced, tarred and feathered, or whatever they do nowadays in Texas, because of what you decided to do with your entity. And the first thing to really look at is why bother? And this is a very personal thing. And I know you mentioned plug and play. These questions, the most we can responsibly do is put into place a list of a knowledge base and a list of considerations that you then have to take and think about, because these are very personal questions. We can help you when you decide what you want to do, possibly. We can help you think about it, but you really want to look at, for example, length of activities. If you're doing a one-off, one-time event that's never going to be repeated, don't spend a lot of money and time making a really expensive entity the hostess. In fact, don't even start an LLC. If you can, find an existing LLC where you can run your money and activities through, take advantage of their liability, and because you're doing one thing once. Most of us are not doing one thing once, but the other thing is resources involved. Are you one person? And you're, like you mentioned, you're going to have to do every last goddamn bit of paperwork and compliance by yourself.
Yeah.
If that's the way it is, you don't want to go for the more complex. And that also relates to the ability to maintain proper procedure. The more complex you get, the more is required of you on an ongoing basis. The board meetings, the filings, the yearly this, the yearly that. It's hard enough, filing taxes for an LLC, and in Washington you have to file a yearly report and certain things. And so many entities that even in the for-profit business world, clients come in and we're selling this company. Okay, who's the board members? Who are the shareholders? I don't know. We haven't had a board meeting in 10 years since this entity started. There's no paperwork. No one has a share certificate. We don't even know how to, and so the more complex you get, the more you have to do, and the more you have to do on an ongoing basis. You want to look at what your long-term goals are, and that's a very personal thing. And speaking about money, is this an entity which in the long run is going to pay people, make a profit? What's going to happen? What do I want out of this in the long term? Not just this year, but over the next 10 years. And personal exposure is very different for each person too. The more and this relates to talks on insurance, this relates to talk on what an acceptable risk is. In a very bizarre sense, the more you own, the more fucked you are when something goes wrong. If you don't own a house and you're a poor person with a lot of student loans, you're not going to be the person they sue. And even if they sue and win on you, you declare bankruptcy and you walk away, basically. You know, in most cases, I mean, you're like, but if you're someone with substantial resources and you've been around, you know, you got a house and a car and this and that and the next thing, your risk is a lot bigger, and the ability for something to go wrong and impact your life in a substantive manner is a lot bigger. And so,
what did you call? Do you have a word for artists and like suing? Oh, they're judgment proof.
Yes, if many people are effectively judgment proof, and you know, my firm, I don't, but one of my partners does like a lot of bankruptcy and debt work, and there's just a lot of people that no matter how much money they owe, no one is going to get it from them ever. And the odd thing is, people stop asking for it. If you don't have any money, oftentimes, not always, but like I've seen it, no one even bothers to call you or try to collect. They know that you don't have anything. There's no point. So, and then there's general legal considerations, and one of them is how important is a personal liability. Tax issues, even within for-profit entities, C Corp and S Corporation and LLC can be taxed differently. There are something called pass-through entities where the company does not pay tax as a separate entity. The profit is just dumped out onto the books, onto the tax returns of the members, the owners of it. And then there are entities where you pay tax at the corporate level. And there are reasons why you may want one or the other, and that's something, again, you sit down with an accountant, someone in your community who understands it, and try to go through it. What are the assets that you own? How is it going to be structured? What's the entity going to own? What's the entity going to rent? You know, who's going to be the leaseholder? Is this going to be an entity going to change hands? So who's going to own it? How many people are going to own it? Is it important to be able to transfer it easily? And pooling of responsibility and assets, which is spoken about. And image and fundraising is important too. She mentioned, if you're going to be out there fundraising for the general public and you're going to be trying to get grants and all these things, they may want to actually see a non-for-profit to give you anything. And one of the things that I actually semi-stole this slide from somewhere else because I really liked it, was that there's a sliding scale of entities, and it's important to think of them this way, where you have entities that are primarily for personal benefit and entities that are primarily for social benefit. And you have the CS Corp and LLC, and then you get in that weird little zone that states are experimenting with, flexible purpose corporations, L3Cs, benefit corporations, where they're allowed to make some profit but not a lot. They're allowed to benefit people but not a ton, or they're allowed to do certain things like a nonprofit, certain things like for-profit, which is really honestly the wave of the future, and it's super necessary because more and more the emphasis and focus of a lot of socially conscious individuals are how can we empower people to do business-y things, to make profit, to invest, but yet instead of worrying about extracting every dollar out of it, they want to build a community, they want to build an experience, they want to make the world a better place, but they also need to pay their bills and make a return for their investors. So the middle is is a really new and exciting place, and that's again that's very state specific. Every state has different ones, and they all work differently and have different requirements, and so it's a little hard to be able to really tell people what to do in this thing. And then all the way on the right, you have the non-for-profit, the big wonderful, beautiful 501c3 organization. And the interesting thing to note is that there's a slide at the bottom, privacy and transparency. And one of the things you always have to realize is, as Kay mentioned, a non-for-profit is owned not by you, but by your shareholders, which is the general public. You can't own a non-for-profit, you can't sell it. I've been asked by clients a surprising number of times of how they can sell their nonprofit. And I have to explain to them that you don't own it. You just control the board because everyone is your best friend and you've been running it for 50 years. But and because of that, there's a lot more transparency. There's a lot more information you have to disclose publicly and a lot more that you sort of have to do for the general public. For many people, small little projects or certain things, you don't necessarily want transparency. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that oftentimes, if someone really wants to see your books, they should get involved at a level that entitles them to see your books. You know, if you're out there really doing your own little art project and you're funding it and you're the one who's ultimately responsible for it, it's not necessary to you know, put it, and again, it's a community thing and it's a personal thing, but the slider generally operates that way, that the more social benefit, the more transparency is expected of you, and the more public control versus private, personal control. So these are all things to really think about depending on your unique needs. And, you know, we've really gone through a number of these things, but when you're selecting an entity, you want to look at what are you doing? What exactly are you offering the public? Are you charging for it? Where's your money coming from? If you are going out and fundraising and looking for big donors, it's very different from if you're throwing fundraising parties that are coming close to breaking even with your costs, or if you're a theme camp where you're charging dues that fully cover your costs. You don't really need to be a nonprofit if your dues 100% cover the cost of everything you do. And in fact, you will have trouble becoming a nonprofit if that's the case. But your desired level of control, the assets that are involved, how important the privacy is to you, how important tax exemption is something people don't often look at. Again, if you're getting small donations for tickets at the door to party, number one, they're probably not tax exempt, or some portion of it is not tax exempt. Number two, how many people are really keeping a receipt and writing off a $25 thing on their tax return from a party they went to? You know, so you don't need the 501c3 tax exemption if no one is actually going to deduct the money that they give to you. Long-term goals and state law is very important because we're all in different states, some of us are in different countries, and the things that you're going to experience in these different assets, while there is a federal IRS decision that you are tax exempt, there is also state law which governs what you are and are not allowed to do in each one of these entities. And because the United States likes to be weird and complicated, it's different in every single state. So, Kay told me she was going to tell you all the secret of the monkey. What is the secret of the monkey?
It's a fuzzy monkey!
Yeah. There you go.
It's a happy little monkey, look at it.
It's a happy monkey, but it is also confused. And it doesn't know what to do. So we, as a group, are going to try to help this monkey get through the rest of the slides.
I forgot that it was confused. I was just excited about the monkey. Sorry.
You get very excited.
I am done.
The monkey.
Monkey.
So, if you know, I say let's make money, even though many people who are doing LLCs are actually not making money, and you know, lucky to break even. But you get the limited liability with an entity. As I mentioned, you want to look, even within the for-profit, your tax treatment is different depending on what you are. Your capital structure, in terms of transferability of interests, varies from LLCs to C Corps to S Corps. The number of shareholders that you're allowed to have varies. You know, if you are going to have a company with 500 shareholders, it's very different from a two-person LLC. Your allocation of profit and loss are something you have to think about, whether you want to be a pass-through entity or not, and you know how that's reflected on the members' books. And that's also, by the way, a very state law-specific thing to some degree, because there are certain states have specific requirements for the way an LLC handles itself internally. Distribution, compensation, is anyone getting paid or not? Is profit getting, kicked out at the end of the year? Your activities, complexity, cost is a big one, and exit strategy, because you want to figure out what's going to happen. Do I want to be able to sell this entity in 10 years? And with the more social venture stuff, you may want to be able to sell it because you're going to put 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears into it. I know people come to me wanting to sell non-for-profits and are surprised when they can't. But if you need an exit strategy, you want to think about that at the beginning. You want to structure something in a way where you could sell it for whatever it's worth to someone else.
Well, yeah, and also you need, in a little more minutia, which way it goes, but exit strategy also for the people who are organizing your entity. Like, how do you manage the exit strategy for people who are on the board? Because you don't want to be stuck where you are right now, real girl, where it's you or nothing. Like if you don't do, it's your way or the highway, But like that's another part of that exit strategy. How do you make sure that you vet the people who are going in? Because like, what if you have a kid, or what if you decide to move to Barcelona, or whatnot. You need to be able to manage.
That's never gonna happen.
I don't know, apparently get on your motorcycle, try to ride around the world and see how far you get. But that's important too. I see a lot in burnout, I see a lot in people walking away from entities that, and then someone's left and the whole community doesn't even know they're depending on one person. So that is also important. How do you keep it relevant for the individuals running it?
And as a related note, because it's also something people very often don't do, someone leaves the community, leaves the area, leaves the organization, but yet they're still the owner of the entity, sometimes the sole owner. And 10 years later, and I've seen this with for-profit businesses too, oh, I bought my partner out. Do you have a paper to show that? Because now someone wants to buy your business, but on paper, he is a 50% owner of your business, and you haven't spoken to him in 10 years, and he doesn't like you. So now you need him to sign something saying that, to give over the official transfer of it. So try as you go along to keep up to date on these specific things. If you decided to leave, just make sure your name's on it. You don't want your name on an LLC that may get sued to you. You don't want it.
Right.
And the people coming in don't want to have to go to you every time they need a signature. Yeah. So and people don't think about this. They're like, oh, okay, we got a new regional, we got a new board member, cool, energy, excitement. And then 3 years from now, you're looking to sign something and you've retired and you're on your motorcycle around the world, and it's a problem.
It's a huge problem, and it really taps people. Like on a personal level, it's really exhausting, and you can lose a lot of your passion for it.
So
stuck in that situation like that.
You mentioned fiscal sponsorship, and a lot of groups do fiscal sponsorship. I'm a huge fan of it.
I love fiscal sponsorship.
Yes, Kay really gets excited in a creepy way by fiscal sponsorship. There's an organization in New York called Fractured Atlas, and that is excellent at it, and that we at Cosm Call have used for a number of years. But fiscal sponsorship is what I call legal money laundering. You have an organization that is a 501c3 who takes in the donation and gives they give a tax exemption for the donation, and then they give you the money. Now,
Sans 7 to 10%.
Well, yes, they keep it. It costs money. They do keep a certain percentage, sometimes even higher than 10% of it as their fee for what they do. But the benefit of it is that especially for large dollar donations, you don't have to be a non-for-profit. It gets processed by someone else. There's very little legal procedure that you need to do. There's very little internal paperwork that you need to do. Because the organization, like Fractured Atlas, is doing everything for you, typically. A good fiscal sponsor will take care of everything for you and just cut you checks as needed. Now, this is not legal money laundering in that you can then go and buy yourself a car. This is money which is restricted by the organization that's giving it to you usually, and also by law. So a fiscal sponsor can only sponsor organizations that are doing projects that are non-for-profit in nature. So you can become a project of, let's say, Fractured Atlas, and they're your fiscal sponsor, and what that means is you are essentially operating under their auspices. And because of that, they maintain certain liability for what you do, so they're going to want to know, they want to know annually, they're going to want to vet you, they're going to want to know annually what you're doing, what you did with the money they gave you, and you have to report that money. They'll usually issue you a 1099, and you have to report that money on your organization's tax returns. And this is not for everyone. If you're getting a lot of large donations on your own, you may not want to do this because you're losing the percentage, which is substantial. Some donors don't like this. It's not cool enough for them, or they're just not interested. And you're not eligible for certain foundations and grants unless you have your own 501c3. So depending again on whether you're getting large dollar donations and how that's working out, this may not be for you. But for many organizations, especially that kind of one-off art project, you get picked to build a temple or whatever next year, that you're doing a one-off thing, fiscal sponsorship may be the way to go. Yeah. Now, while there are many organizations that do it and it's a great service, I don't recommend that you get your 501c3 and run out and fiscally sponsor other people, right? Because you are going to probably mess it up, and you're going to end up in trouble, and they're going to end up in trouble, and it's not going to be good for anyone. So if you're interested in getting fiscal sponsorship, find someone who's really good at it. Find someone who does this as their, like their primary mission, and suck up the fact that they're keeping a percentage of your money, which is not necessarily unreasonable given that they have operational costs and they're not exactly raking it in, and they're nonprofits themselves, obviously. So it's a very good option, and for many people, this is probably the recommended route to go.
So I want to hit on that for just another minute because I really do love fiscal sponsorship. Fiscal sponsorship is part of a type. I know, I'm getting a little. So fiscal sponsorship organizations are sort of part of a type of nonprofit organization that I'd recommend everyone who's looking at a nonprofit organization takes a look at. They're called mission-serving organizations or technology assistance organizations. Is that and the mission of those nonprofit organizations is to facilitate the growth and development of other nonprofit organizations. That is their charity, is that they are a support system to nonprofits. So things like fiscal sponsorship are really great. I've seen it work in the burner community a number of times with folks, or even just the arts community, take it out of the burner community, where you want to do a site-specific dance program in a park, and you and your 5 friends are like, we want to do this program, we need training, and then we got this guy who wants to give us $5,000, but we don't even have a business. And that's when you can reach out to Fractured Atlas, who offers a number of different levels of engagement in fiscal sponsorship. You can do project or programmatic sponsorship, or you can do entire business fiscal sponsorship. So it really is, at the very least, an amazing thing to look at and research in regards to the kind of artistic and social projects that you're doing.
And many of these organizations, like Fractured Atlas, also offer a host of other support services.
Right, HR,
insurance,
medical.
Yeah, various types of insurance for your events or other things. So if you're starting out and such an organization, it services your area or services the type of work you do, because many fiscal sponsorships won't just sponsor anyone, they'll only sponsor art, or they'll only sponsor, religious or whatever. If you have an organization, check it out, look at their website, talk to them, talk to other people in your community, look up this great knowledge base that we someday may exist with all this information on a national and international level, and give it serious thought of whether or not it's going to meet your needs.
And also, it's generally, or maybe you can clarify, but I don't feel like it's common at all for people to be in perpetuity under fiscal sponsorship. It's really something that I've personally seen. I worked for a fiscal sponsorship organization in Seattle for a while called Shunpike. It was specifically for the arts. It's pretty cool. But we would really encourage people not to stay. Like if you were really going to need fiscal sponsorship for that long, then you probably are going to want to figure out how to keep that capital for yourself and increase your capacity. So it is not a solution for 20 years. It's a solution for the project or for a few years to see if you really, maybe you're just determining whether or not that's the right situation for you. Are you going to get grants? Are you going to need to write tax receipts? And you can really test that water by being fiscally sponsored.
Very true.
I know.
So, for people who decide they need to go further, that's not enough for them. You have what's called 501c3 tax exemption. Now, 501c3 is the third of the C's in the 501. There are 7 of them. And 501c3, though, is the only one that can issue a receipt for donation. So a tax-exempt company just means that you don't pay income tax on the profit you make, which is cool, it's nice. But the holy grail that a lot of people really want is to be able to issue a tax deduction letter to people who give them money, so that those people then can take that money off their tax returns as well. And that's only a 501c3. It's lots and lots of legal work, which, I guess I appreciate, given that I get paid to do legal work. It's lots of oversight, and there's a lot of risk, because you have the highest level of government regulation. So it really is the golden handcuffs. And I wish I would have had the monkey in them, but next year.
Next year.
See, we can always improve.
In case you all die between now and then.
Just visualize it for a second in your mind, if you can.
The monkey?
Yeah, the monkey in handcuffs.
Okay,
think about it.
That's starting to sound
We
weird.
can move on.
Okay. Good job.
How do you get tax exemption? It's really a 2-step process to get to be a 501c3. you first have to incorporate and organize under state law.
Right.
As many people here said, I already have, and like I said, we already have a New York non-for-profit, but we're not tax exempt, and we're not a 501c3 because we did not file what's called a 1023 application to the IRS. And but what's important here is to note that in step one of this, you not only have to comply with the state law or the whatever they call them in Canada law, but you also have to, in order to get your federal exemption, which you wouldn't get if you were in Canada anyway, but in order to get your federal exemption, you need to, when you incorporate with the state, comply with what the IRS is going to ask for at stage 2. So this is something, a process that has to really be built from day one, where you go to the state and you file with the state, has to already be built to go till the end with the IRS.
Yeah, there's generally, in Washington State, I believe it's 27 months, that you have 27 months from the time.
According to the IRS, you have 27 months from the time that you file at the state level to get your 1023 in. Now, you can do it any time after that, but if you file within 27 months, it goes, if you get your 501c3 status, it goes back to the date when you filed with the state.
Which can be rad if you're soliciting donations,
right,
or like that kind of thing. You'd be like, we're in contact with the IRS, it's there, we appreciate your donation, and we are really believing that we're going to get our 501 status here fairly soon, and we'll be able to get you that tax refund.
Yes. So, the first thing you want to look at the state level is where. What state do you want to be in? Different states have different laws. For most people, you probably want to stick with the state where you are located. However, some people, like New York, is a terrible state to file a non-for-profit. They are incredibly anal, they are crazy, they are not communicative, they are not responsive, and basically what they do is randomly change what they want to see in a non-for-profit filed in New York State. How do you find out? Very simple. You file one, and then they come back and go, it's missing paragraph this.
It wrong.
Yeah, it's missing a paragraph that says X, Y, and Z. Really, I've done 30 of them, and none of them had that paragraph. Okay, so now we put that paragraph in, and you send it back to them, and sometimes all of a sudden there's something else, because a different person may look at it. But they're a pain. But and what occasionally people will do is just go for Delaware, because Delaware is the state that loves money from filings, and so they make life really easy for you. The problem is that if you don't incorporate in your home state, you have to pay an annual fee for someone to be your address for service of process in whatever state you are, and file with that state every year, and if it's not your home state, you can get weird, it couldn't get more complicated. So for most people, you want to file in the state where your activities are. It also kind of looks nicer for your community. We are a Seattle, Washington, whatever, New York non-for-profit.
And just as an example, in California, if we filed in Delaware, then we'd have to pay the same fees and everything in California because we do any business in California.
Right. Well, you'd have to file a certificate to do business, and maybe, So yeah, it's simpler to file in your home state, but there can be situations where your home state really sucks. One of the only times I've seen, even with New York being so terrible, the only times I've seen a New York non-for-profit go to Delaware was when they needed something done right away. And in New York, it's almost impossible to get non-for-profits filed right away. In Delaware, if you pay enough money, anything could happen within like an hour. No, really, like there's a tiered pricing system based on how long you want them to take to do it. And if you pay enough money, they'll get you almost anything. And for 24-hour turnaround is pretty much always available for a fee. In New York, there's a long process. Almost every nonprofit has to go to the Department of Education first for approval, and then it has to go to the state, and if the state has a problem, sometimes it has to go back to the Department of Education, and then going back to the state. So it can take like 2 or 3 months of just stupid fucking mail back and forth to get this done. And I have had one particular case where someone needed the entity formed right away, and they went to Delaware, and the money wasn't an issue for them, and they were able to handle the complexity. So yeah. In order to get through the second stage of the process with the IRS, your charter has to provide that no income is going to go directly to any individual shareholder, limits on legislative activity and political activity, and provide for assets to be distributed to other charities upon dissolution. Because if your non-for-profit goes belly up or decides not to operate anymore, you can't just take the money and run. You have to, the money has to move to another organization which is serving the public the same way that you are serving the public.
So Ignition Northwest, we have it written that if Ignition Northwest goes bye-bye, that currently all of our assets will go to the Black Rock Arts Foundation. Might change that to the Burning Man Project.
Just keep it at Brown.
Oh, right, yeah, I'll keep it at Brad,
Kay,
yeah.
Kay has no dinner plans for tonight.
That's true. If anyone wants to destroy my organization and take the money, I am down. Also,
So, this is a list, and if you don't know what these things are, you're going to look at the list, read the first one, and stop. That's cool. We are going to go through each one of them in detail. Therefore, I won't even read you the list. The first, that's a lot of words. The first thing that you have to think about when, sorry.
Is this, are all of these just section 3, or did some of them apply to just the 501Cs?
I'll let you take that one.
I'm thinking. I don't know the answer to that. I believe,
Do you know Brooke?
I don't know, but Brooke may be able to, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, the operational
Yeah,
test
that's an obvious.
doesn't apply, because to the other C, 5, 6, 7, because they're not scientific, charitable, etc. There are other operational tests that apply to each one of those that make it so that their activities are tax exempt, but they're not as tightly restricted in terms of operations. Like a bar association, like a motorcycle club, like a trade association, something that is organizing big conventions, that are fan conventions.
But in terms of the other ones of these, I'm not sure, I don't know about the other ones. Do you know which ones apply? Does private and private benefit apply across the board?
Private annulment is modified with.
You guys explain what that is.
Well, if you want, if you'd like, we can go through them, and then I would actually love for Brooke to, if you don't mind, to discuss briefly what applies to the other ones. It's something that I just hadn't really thought about. It's a really good question, and it's something, but I don't want to give an answer given that I hadn't actually thought about it. But
is that your confused monkey face?
that's my yeah. I'm crying
It's
along
not
that
that
side.
relevant to most of what
Yes.
Burning Man
Yeah.
community does.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Because some of the other ones are really weird. Not weird, but like really kind of specific to.
Like the Elks Club,
Yeah.
or the Lions, or Rotary Clubs, or,
So,
there's all these things. I mean, it's better not to get too hung up on all that stuff, because just
Yeah.
this stuff is hard enough.
yeah.
That's true.
But so the operational test basically decides whether or not you fit within the definition of a 501c3. And this is a lot of words. And if you Google this, you will find these words. And you can read them. But what it basically says is that you, in organization, in order to be tax exempt, you have to be operated exclusively for one or more exempt purposes. And the exempt purposes are the ones listed in section 501c3 of the IRS code, surprisingly enough. An organization is not regarded as a 501c, as being operated exclusively for these purposes if a substantial part of its activities don't further the exempt purpose. Now that really all sounds like saying the same thing, but that's typically the way laws are written. And the exempt purposes are charitable, religious, educational, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, which is what we do at Burning Man, fostering national or international amateur sports competitions, and preventing cruelty to children or animals, which is not what we do at Burning Man. And again, you can sort of look into this. There is case law on some of these, and there's IRS opinions. There's a lot of history behind all these. But in order to be a 501c3, you need to be operated exclusively for one of these exempt purposes. The next thing I want to focus on is private annulment. Now, there's two things. There's private inurement and private benefit. Private inurement is for the insiders, for the people in the organization. And what this rule says is, it's not a good thing, by the way. Private inurement is a bad thing. Private inurement means that you are taking money the organization is coming in and you are diverting it to your own purposes. Now, it's not an easy one because it's not a quantitative test, it's a qualitative test, and it's very case by case, and it can get really complicated. In general, reasonable salary, commission, benefits, payments, whatever, for work that is performed is not private inurement. And that depends on the region you're in, the field you're in, the business you do. You know, if you're a hospital, if you're a healthcare non-for-profit, they will look at what a CEO at a similarly situated corporate, for-profit corporation makes, and they will use that as the baseline for deciding what you should make. Non-profit organizations are not prevented from making a profit. You can have a non-for-profit, and you can encourage. Yes, you can make a lot of money, millions of dollars. I mean, but you can't give big bonuses to the people who made the money unless it's reasonable based on what they did and what similarly situated people would get. This is a big one because there are large penalties for this. You can lose your exempt status if they find out, if the IRS decides you're doing this, but it generally only applies to insiders. The IRS is really looking at, are you diverting your funds to the K. Morrison bank account?
Do that.
And are you taking advantage of your nonprofit status to make an unreasonable private, amount of money? And I don't want to use the word benefit because private benefit is a very different thing. Private benefit is not really for insiders. What it looks like is your organization benefiting a smaller group of people in a manner which is outsized and much larger than what it's giving to other people. There can be, and there often is, some private benefit. For example, I started a non-for-profit to bring art and redevelopment type things to a specific region. 5 people in this room own buildings in this shithole region. My non-for-profit, because it's so awesome, is going to get all the crime out of the region by bringing in art and beauty, and every building in the region is going to go up in value 5 times. That's private benefit. However, because we exist in the real world, it's allowed. And it's basically, they look at the quantitative and the qualitative aspect of it. And what they want to, and in order to get in trouble here, you have to really be having an organization where specific people are benefiting a ton and the general public is benefiting a little bit. And that's really where you start to run into trouble. If you revitalize an area and everyone who owns business benefits, but the general public benefits too, because everyone in the town now has a downtown area that's safe to be in, you're fine. But if you're doing something which is, cleaning up a shorefront that is only allowed to be used by 5 people who live near it, but we're cleaning up the environment, you may run into trouble because what you're really doing is cleaning up land that only 5 people are allowed to use, and you're taking this public funds and this 501c3 status and all that and benefiting 5 people.
Right, it just goes back to, you're serving the public, your shareholders, it has to be that.
Right.
It has to be wide for you to be cool.
And the IRS is going to look at, is a private benefit necessary to the operational test? Is it necessary to what you're doing as a charity? It's necessary in the case of a revitalization of a downtown area because you can't take away the increase in value of the land somehow. It just has to happen that way. You make an area better, the land's going to go up in value. And again, like I said, how large is it compared to what you're doing for the public? And one area where some of you may actually have specific issues is the idea of member benefits. If there is membership, like the World Wildlife Federation, Bronx Zoo, those type, from New York, you pay a whatever fee to be a member. Those are generally 501c3s, and you get in the mail a little packet with a sticker of an animal or someone being beaten by the police for the ACLU, and you know, you get to feel good, the magnet, and some sticker for your car, and free parking at the museum, you know, for two times. And that's okay, that's allowed, as long as, number one, it's not like too private and personal, like, you know, one person is getting a special benefit, and also as long as it's not too large.
Right.
Like, you pay $50 to the zoo and you get, you know, $100 worth of free stuff, or, you know, and that's where all the money is going in the organization. There are restrictions in lobbying and legislative activities for non-for-profits, which has become, I think, a little more of a grayer area, you know, for various reasons in some ways, but I'm not even really going to focus on this much, because my sense is that most people here are not going to be doing a lot of political lobbying. But it's important to note that education about causes is never a problem. But you get into trouble with political affiliation, if, you know, and with an organization that only exists to lobby. So you can lobby on behalf of your cause. You can meet with your local fire, congressman, whatever person of interest to get them on board, and you can try to push for, you know, your agenda with the government. But if you only exist to lobby, it's a problem. And if you're, you know, very political and having political affiliations, it's a problem. But any sort of educational stuff is not going to get you into trouble. Now, taxes, you know, it is almost the end of tax season here in the U.S. So this is a very, yeah, this is, and we have a financial planner who will tell you how not to pay any taxes. There's something called unrelated business income tax, which applies to non-for-profits. And the idea behind this is that if you are a non-for-profit, you may do some activities which you're allowed to do because they're not substantial enough to pull you out of the operational test. So you still can be a non-for-profit. You meet the criteria. But you're doing these other things, which we'll talk about in a second, which the government has decided you actually have to pay income tax on the money you make for those.
Right.
And the rule basically is, if an activity is an unrelated business and is subject to this beautiful UBIT tax, if it is a trade or a business, it is regularly carried on and it is not substantially related to furthering the exempt purposes of your organization. And this can be a little complicated. If you think you are you're doing commerce-like activities, you're having a little gift shop, you're in your art gallery or whatever you're doing, you are selling T-shirts, you're doing things like that that are commercial in nature, but are not really part of your exempt purpose. If you are a 501c3 that is organized for the purpose of selling T-shirts, don't know how you would be, but you are, you know, we are providing stylish T-shirts for poor people because they need stylish T-shirts. Then, even if you're charging a small fee because it's part of your exempt purpose, you wouldn't have this apply to it. But if you do just sort of set up a gift shop to help fund your activities, some of that or all of that may be under this thing. And again, get an accountant, an attorney, or someone who is familiar with your business and with what you're doing to answer this question for you.
That's a good one. It's another one of those, I think, myths that people have about nonprofits. One is that you can't profit, which is not true. You absolutely can profit. And the other is that you can't do anything that stands outside of your mission. And you absolutely can, to a point, with the understanding that you don't get tax exemption on everything that you do as a nonprofit. It has to be, your tax exemption is specific to your mission.
Right, and to things which further your mission.
Right.
Commerciality doctrine. These are getting, by the way, more exciting as they go along. So, like, I just feel the tension building. You know, it's like DJ is just ready to drop like the bass right now. Drop it. A 501c3, as Kate just said, can operate a trade or business, even as a substantial part of its activities. However, there are 2 bullet points here, so there's 2 things I'm going to say. The operation of the trade or business is in furtherance of your exempt purpose. So like when you talk about a store, if you're operating, sorry?
Museum stores are.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're educational in nature and you're selling educational materials, that would be in furtherance of your exempt purpose. It could be, depending, of course, how it's done exactly. And the organization is not organized or operated for the primary purpose of carrying on an unrelated trade or business. Now, one of the things that you have to always think about here is the IRS, part of this is the IRS doesn't want people using tax exemption and then also basically just running a business through it. But it's also an issue of sort of fairness and competition. That it's really unfair if I have my coffee shop and then down the block there's another coffee shop that for some reason is a non-for-profit and we have the same product but he's selling it for cheaper because he's not paying income tax on what he makes and because he's able to somehow deduct certain things that come to him. So the IRS is basically saying you can have a trade or business. You can sell tickets, you can sell products, you can sell items, and many non-for-profits do. But what they do is they sell below cost in a manner that would not be possible if they were operating a for-profit business. Or they, and they use their 501c3 status to benefit the general public through the operation of what they're doing.
I love that model, actually. I think I love that.
And this is your factors that you're going to look at. Like I said, are you competing with for-profit entities? Is your business model focused on the generation and accumulation of profits? Or is it focused on making money to help people? Or subsidizing what we are seeing through sales? Is it commercial like business and marketing practice? Are you advertising everywhere, come buy our shit? Are you serving the general public? Or are you serving a more discreet charitable class? And if you're just a coffee shop open to everyone, or are you a coffee shop for homeless people that charges 30 cents a cup to help subsidize the coffee, but it's really just about giving coffee to homeless people? And is there significant donative support? The IRS looks at you funny when nobody is donating. It's all just buying products. Well, then why are you a non-for-profit? Everyone's just buying something for a fair price. And if you have substantial commercial, unrelated business, you are in danger of losing your 501c3 status.
On that note, I think that this is something really appropriate sort of to our community and where we're at, is that I see a lot, and it freaks me out, is communities wanting to start a nonprofit organization just to throw their events. There are a bunch of them. They've gone through. I've seen them in the burner community. There are a number of nonprofit organizations that are just throwing events. And that's really kind of dangerous. It's kind of not what the nonprofit structure is for. And it's also a hell of a lot of work to be able to produce a couple of events. And you're not getting donations. Like all of your revenue is through ticket sales. Sound familiar, Susie Selling? You're not getting donations. You're not writing grants. You're really just subsidizing your business through the cost of tickets. That's something you might want to think about. Are you really, and this goes back to one of the earlier slides, is the goal of your business to bring Figment to town? Is the goal of your business to start an alternative school out of burner principles? Is the goal of your business to bring art to kids who need to make art? Or do you need to find a way to fund your 2 big ass events a year? And really something to consider in this planning. What is your long-term goal? What are your long-term projects?
And
that's relevant. It's totally relevant.
One thing to bear in mind with events is many people here throw events a few times a year. But the events are fundraisers, similar to a school having a dinner or someone having a big cocktail with important congressmen for $500 a plate, except we charge less and we look funnier and we play loud music. But the concept is we're throwing the event not so much for the event, although we want the event to be a community experience and we want it to be fun and we all want to not do illegal drugs and dance, but what we do with the money that we make is do something that's free. So Figment just had its New York fundraiser, and they charged a nice amount to come in, and it was fancy, and it was nice, it was really cool, and they had an art auction, but that's not why Figment exists. Figment does the event to pay for the Figment. So, right, if you're doing the event to pay for the event, it becomes a little difficult to actually justify going through the process and also whether or not this is even legal.
Which reminds, oh yeah, go ahead, and I have a comment as well, go ahead.
And just a comment on that, if you are a profit status and you are taking in $100,000 but also spending $100,000 on the event, then your profit's zero and your taxes are zero anyway.
100%. And no one's asking for a letter, so why bother doing this to begin with?
And some of the stuff also that we didn't touch on earlier, I realized that we sort of skipped it, is that the IRS is serious about making sure that you are doing what you say you do. They will go to your website. They will take screenshots of your website. They will send you in the mail packets of photos of your website with things highlighted and questions pointing to sections. Like, I know, I've done it. So it really is imperative that you know what your mission is, you know who you're serving, you represent yourself appropriately on your public pages, that media about you talks about what it is that you're doing, because this is, if you want to talk to me later, I'll tell you how nonprofits started in the US, but it really is crucially important that you are representing yourself accurately, that what you are doing is appropriate to a nonprofit structure, and that there's no reference to drugs, there's no reference to illegal activity, there's it's the IRS and bitches. They are so anal about it, they really are.
When you file the 1023, not only will they go to your website and Google you and do all that background research on you, which by the way, in a bizarre sense, the best time to file a 1023 is before you've done anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And before you even put up a website, before you have
Don't
any
give
presence.
it to the press.
Yeah,
Yes.
before you've done anything, if you have no public profile, you will have the easiest time filing a 1023. But with the IRS is going to read everything you say really carefully. And this is why when you do a 1023, getting someone who has done one before, if a knowledge-based something, an attorney who specializes in them, is super, super, super helpful. Because I've seen the bizarre letters the IRS comes back with. I had one client who came to me. It was a friend of mine, a nonprofit, and I helped him out for free. And it was basically they hired somebody for a flat rate of $500 to incorporate them and do their 1023. Now, if anyone has done a 1023, you will know that no professional person will do this for $500, not with any level of competency. It's hours of work. Many hours of work. And it's open-ended because it can go on for 6 months to a year easily with many back and forth. And I mean, it's worth a lot more than $500. It's a few grand worth of work at a minimum from anyone competent. And so this guy did it for them, and he basically, probably had a secretary put together some forms and send it in. The IRS came back with question after question after question. It's 2 years after it was initially filed. He calls me up and he's like, "Can you help me?" And the sticking point was that they were a New York not-for-profit, and they had a raffle as a fundraiser, which the IRS saw on their website that they were advertising, and it was, $100 a ticket, like $100 grand prize in this raffle. So it was, big money involved here. And it was basically what the IRS said to them was, "You are violating the New York State gambling laws," which they were. And because, of course, they didn't ask anyone before doing it. They just saw that other people do raffles, so it must be okay. And they had this crazy idea, which a lot of nonprofits do, that if you write "no purchase necessary" on the tickets and on your website in little print, it's okay to do a raffle. It's actually not. No purchase necessary in New York, and this is a totally different thing. The sweepstakes laws in New York doesn't really get you anywhere, but whatever. Not even going to get into that. So, it's not exciting. The IRS was going to deny their exemption, and after months of fighting with the IRS and multiple letters back and forth, I got the IRS to agree to a compromise where they will become tax exempt, but only from the date the raffle ended and on.
Wow.
So, we worked it out, but they got into a lot of trouble. And the funny thing was, the IRS had sent 3 or 4 letters before I got involved, and they had resolved all those issues on their own. And then right before the IRS was going to give their tax exemption, they went back to the website again, and that's when the raffle had been posted. So it's not only, the raffle was a new problem when they finally came to me, So it's really, which goes to show that while you can't submit and then go and make the offensive website. You don't do anything stupid until you've gotten your approval. Because as much as you need to comply with the law on an ongoing basis, once you're done with your 1023 and you get your tax exempt letter, the level of scrutiny is generally lower. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do things that will get you thrown in jail, that will get, large financial penalties. But it does mean that the IRS is not going to be checking your website on a regular basis unless it's porn, which the government has shown the IRS workers like to spend a lot of time going to. That's true, actually. But, sorry, you were going to say something?
I have a love-hate relationship with the 1023 because there's a huge amount of soul searching involved, and I would never dream of hiring somebody to do the really important parts about what do we do, what do we stand for.
You can't hire someone to do that. As someone who does do this occasionally for paying clients, I give them a sample narrative, and I say, here's what a successful narrative has looked like. The IRS has approved this for me. I black out the names if necessary, even though it's a public document, so you don't have to, but whatever. And I give it, and I say, and here is what a successful budget looks like. And here's what a successful description of your fundraising activities looks like. And then you see that as a model, you give me yours, I look at it and I say, okay, on page 1 you said this, but on page 10 you said something that's a little different, and your numbers are not right for each year, and you have a $30,000 number here that's unexplained that the IRS is going to look at, and so then I go back to you, and then you give me a redraft, and maybe I'll fix up if some of my clients are not necessarily native English speakers or whatever, so you work with it. But yes, I can't do it for you. I cannot do it for anyone, unless it has to come from you. But a good attorney can tell you what stupid things you're saying.
Yeah.
I think we have to end at 6:30, and I know there are many people in the room who have different visions, but I personally was hoping to get a little bit of coverage on the benefit corporations, and I was just wondering if it would be possible to, if we.
The reason why I wasn't going to go into that is that it's very state specific.
Okay.
And many states don't have any of them.
Okay, so then the advice is Google my own states.
Google or speak to an expert in your states. There have been what state are you in? Sorry, DC?
DC, Maryland, yeah.
Paul Nagel in New York, who is involved with the Burning Man scene, has his own organization that does a lot of think tank collaborative stuff relating to this. And there's a few other people who make it their kind of area of interest to track the developments in this all around. Sure, other main resources. So there are people you can go to, or websites you can probably go to, and talks you can watch that really are focused on that, and you can find out what's going on in your state. The last thing I want to do, and then take questions, is covering your ass is super important. All the things that we've told you that you get from an organization, the minute shit hits the fan and somebody hurts himself or somebody sues you or something, the plaintiff attorney who's coming after you is going to try to pick apart everything you did and find ways to get at you personally and to show that you were violating things and to do all that. So as much as I say that once you get your 501c3 you have less scrutiny, true, but you need to keep good corporate structure and procedures. If someone leaves, you replace them. You have board meetings if you need to have board meetings. You have minutes from everything. Don't sign a major contract unless you're authorized to under your bylaws, or you have minutes to specifically allow for that. Keep things going on a regular basis, and you can often find, someone in your community, an attorney or whatnot, who can give you board minute forms and stuff, so you don't have to necessarily get an attorney every time you do something, but keep things going on a regular basis. Piercing the corporate veil is a scary thing where a plaintiff's attorney convinces a judge that you actually were commingling all your monies and you didn't really have a business, it was really just you personally, or you violated certain things where we can now go after you personally. So compliance on an ongoing basis is really, really important for maintaining all the protections, the tax exemption, and everything else that you get for the benefits of both a nonprofit and a for-profit entity. And I am going to just sort of cut this a little short because we are running out of touch. There is our contact information, but if anyone has questions now that they want, or things they want to say, they want to add.
Sacramento Valley Spark, we lucked out and one of our members was a lawyer for the state that reviewed nonprofit forms.
Nice.
And two of the first things that we did at the forms was run the core project money through us, and then ran the money for Vernal Equinox through us. And the first one was a total headache because the money documents weren't kept well.
Right.
And getting those finances clear, we always post our finances on our web. And the second one worked out really well, and we're holding their money for whatever they're going to do next go around. Yeah.
What's your mission?
What's our mission? You know, I'm gonna have to go back and read that after listening to this, because I'm reading all the reasons why, what you're accomplishing as a nonprofit. I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Yeah, because if you're doing things that are outside of your mission, it's a problem. Like I said, with fiscal sponsorship and all those sort of things, taking someone under your wing can only be done if what they're doing complies with what you're doing.
I think that our mission is that we're going to help put on more, make more burger type events happen in our community. I think that was our mission.
Because I see a lot of non-profit-oriented thinking in the for-profit corporations like LLCs, etc., I see a lot of people getting into unintended tax consequences, where personally don't make money, but because they make money as the corporation or on paper with the pass-through, all of a sudden individuals have to come up with tax. So think about that. Also, when you mentioned exit strategy, really important, because if someone dies, those shares go into their estate. The estate then might have a rated basis. Again, huge unintended tax potentiality. So
it's not just the taxes. One of the big things when you have something like Burning Man is if one of the founders, and I don't know anything about the internal structure of Burning Man, but theoretically if one of the founders, the owners of the Black Rock City LLC died, those shares can go into probate. And you now have this massive public thing which is in a weird legal status where all the relatives are fighting over it. So one of the benefits of a non-for-profit is that nobody owns it, and therefore when someone dies, it doesn't matter. I mean, it sucks when they die, but it doesn't matter for the ongoing life of the organization. And yes, having a plan for that and understanding how that plays out is important, whether it's having wills or having certain automatic buyback provisions where when someone dies, the company buys back their shares automatically for a set price. There are things that you can do to pull it out from going into probate and to pull it out of people's wills. But we trust each other. If me and Kay form an organization, I trust her for the most part. And so I know that she's not going to try to steal something, but I don't know what her children, who she doesn't even know about, are going to do, or her cousin or something else. They may be like, oh, there's $500,000 in a bank account, and I want those shares.
So buy, sell. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Also, with the nonprofit, just my personal perspective is I know according to the textbook, since everyone's a shareholder or beneficiary of the nonprofit, the government ultimately regulates nonprofit status, and if they determine that you're not doing your job, they can seize the assets of the nonprofit and redistribute it to some other places doing the purpose. So something to be aware of, to do everything above board. Also, I know that most people individually donating don't donate enough for it to actually be deductible.
Right.
Because they have to donate 7.5% of their income to even write it off.
Right.
Well,
It's different.
it depends on it's very personal. But the one thing that you mentioned about regulation is that there is a lot of state law that governs transfer of assets out of nonprofits. I don't know about other states, but I know in New York, the state attorney general has to approve certain sales of assets. So if you own a piece of property and you want to sell it, you have to get attorney general approval before you sell it. So again, it comes back to the question of whether or not that's okay for you, depending on what you're doing and what you own and how you're dealing with it.
Cece?
Oh, just really quick on the, I took over gaining our nonprofit status after the people who had originally submitted it, and there was a couple years in the process. And one of the last questions they had was related to our mission statement, because our mission statement actually said for the Burning Man community, or for the burner community.
And the IRS did not like that at all. We did end up getting submitted, or approved, and then about 2 years after that, we revised our mission statement and removed burner out of the statement because we realized what we're doing is so much beyond just the burners. It's for everybody. So just be very careful with your wording because they will nitpick every single word.
Yeah, they do. And just so, like on that, like Ignition Northwest did the total rebel scrapper route where we never hired a lawyer and we never did it, and it took 4 years. 4 years. And oh, there you are. And yeah, thanks, Cece. And also, it took so much resource. Like it took so much of our time as leaders, as organizers who were excited about getting out there and making art or throwing killer events or changing the world. And monkeys. But it really drained our core leadership team. It broke some people. So that is something really to consider as well when you're thinking about how much energy, how much expenditure can you give as an organizing body to creating these kinds of structures.
And if you really do need it, is there someone who, I don't know, for $2,000 or so will take care of this for you? And while that's a lot of money, it may be better than 4 years of your most important artists doing something they hate doing and don't know how to do.
And also, the hottest way to fundraise is for legal fees. Yeah. So last question, we'll let you guys go.
Yeah, this is actually a closing question. So the Business 201 tomorrow, is that more of the same or something different?
I'm glad you asked.
It's the same exact thing, We're going to do the slides backwards. Business 201. Business 201.
I don't remember, it's confused.
You're going to change from a monkey to a squirrel.
Yes.
Oh.
Business 201 is divided into two parts. Part one is a primer on contracts for the layperson, where we're going to go through, number one, how to approach a contract, what sort of things to look at, and what the parts of a contract are so they're not so gross and scary. The second part is going to be this discussion of scenarios that we think and that we've gotten feedback from people affect a lot of organizations. We're going to do at least 2, maybe 3 scenarios depending on how much time we have, but trying to get everyone to talk about how we have dealt with common problems at entities and that that we face in the community that are somewhat structural in nature.
Yeah, and we're circling around sort of how and when do you hire? What happens if there's embezzlement or mismanagement of money, and
how to get rid of people.
How do you fire or get rid of people who are volunteers or board members or?
That's easy. Just make your life visible.
You're hired.
I just did it.
I did actually just do that.
That's the passive-aggressive California way to do it. I'm from New York, so I just run over with my car.
I know this is a lot of information. You guys actually seem to be paying attention. I really appreciate that. That's great. Please let us know. You look like you want to say something.
And forms.
Waiting for the moment where I can clap.
There are forms here. I don't care if you fill them out, but someone probably does. So go ahead and do them if you are so inclined.
And feel free to find us and chat with us as well.